Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the committee, Mr. Selig. Welcome to your family as well. I want to just start by associating myself with the questions that Senator Hyde-Smith and Senator Klobuchar asked about the big potential change in the mission of the CFTC with regard to digital commodities and what that would mean for the CFTC if it were to take on that additional challenge. And you have described you described it at a high level, but could I just press you a bit more on this? What do you think it would take? What would be the first 2 or 3 things that you would do? How would you approach this with a little bit more detail as the CFTC takes on this, significant new focus potentially, depending on what happens in Congress?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And I think it's vitally important, as I mentioned, that we have certainty, clarity, and consumer protection in these markets. They're being used by everyday Americans, and having real guardrails around what these markets look like is critical. And I really do applaud the efforts of this committee, as well as others within the Congress, for putting together comprehensive bipartisan market structure legislation. And I think that's the first step. Once we get market structure legislation in place, I think it's vitally important that we implement with haste, because these markets are going to keep developing, and we have to keep in pace with the rapid speed of innovation. There are a lot of things that we can do with our existing authority, and I would very much take on the mission of making sure that our investors are protected in these markets. The CFTC has authority to police fraud and manipulation in the crypto spot markets. It has authority to regulate the futures markets, and also when there's leverage and financing involved in these transactions.
So I think, and I'm going to move on to my next question, but I think actually what I'm asking is more of a management question. I understand that you can describe sort of what the mission or what the organization is supposed to be doing, but the question of how you manage this kind of a transition is, I think, what I'm trying to get at, and perhaps the other members of the committee are trying to get at. But I'd like to move to another question. In 2018, the Supreme Court gave states the power to decide whether to legalize sports betting or not. And in my home state of Minnesota, we have not done that. We've not legalized sports betting. But of course, Minnesotans can bet on sports online anytime they want to through the so-called prediction market platforms. And as I'm sure you also know, through the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, tribes have the authority to regulate gaming within their reservations, including sports betting. So this is my question. It seems to me that there's a bit of a conflict here, because we've got these prediction market platforms which are offering sports wagers on tribal land with no tribal oversight. And now sports betting firms will argue that state and tribal laws don't apply because they're offering these event contracts, but seems to me that this could be a semantics difference without an actual practical difference. Certainly people in Minnesota don't know whether they're doing a sports wager or an event contract wager. So here's my question. Putting aside this distinction between a sports event contract and a sports wager, current CFTC regulations clearly prohibit event contracts related to gaming from being offered. So if confirmed, can you commit to enforcing that prohibition? Tell us a bit about how you see this issue.
Thank you, Senator. As someone who spent many years practicing law at law firms, as well as studying the law in law school, these are complex issues as to interpretation of what it means to constitute gaming. And of course, I have the utmost respect for our judges that are working on these issues in the court system, and I intend to always adhere to the law and follow what judicial decisions tell me to follow. I also believe that these types of issues are ones that we can work through together. Some of them are congressional issues as to whether we change statutes in certain areas. But of course, I was not at the CFTC at the time that this portion of the Dodd-Frank Act was drafted. It was not working in this committee or on the Hill at the time. And so these are just very challenging interpretive questions that I will look to the courts on.
Well, it seems to me that the CFTC's prohibition on gaming is pretty unambiguous, and also Congress has made this clear that when it gave the CFTC authority to prohibit certain gaming contracts, that it intended to prevent the gambling through these futures contracts. So seems to me that this is semantics difference, and we should be able to count on the CFTC to enforce the law. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.